Hey there, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my 19 favorite action figures of 2019. As I record this, it's the afternoon of December 31st, so hopefully I get this all done and recorded and posted before the new year actually rolls around. But yeah, I've been doing these lists every year since 2012. I was originally doing it on my blog right up until last year. This is going to be my first year covering it in a video. So yeah, I'm excited to do that. And the way I've done it every year is rather than post my top 10, which seems to be the norm, I always did my top 12 of 2012 and then my top 13 of 2013 and so on. So yeah, for this episode, I'm going to do my top 19 of 2019. I think maybe I'll cap it at 20 next year, my top 20 of 2020, and then going forward, it'll just be my top 20 of 2021 and so forth. Because, yeah, these lists are always hard to compile. A lot of thought and effort goes into them. I get a lot of figures every year. This year, if I had to guess, I'm somewhere over 200. So to whittle it down to just a few of my favorites, it can be tough. And with action figures, I like most of the things I buy. Like when I do my top movie list, I go to a lot of movies and I never really know what to expect, and I leave a lot of them disappointed. But with toys, if it doesn't look like something I'm going to like, I just don't buy it. So I don't have a lot of toys in my collection that I don't like. Every now and again, I might have to buy something I don't really want just because it comes with a Build-A-Figure piece and I've got all the other pieces or something like that. But that's a rarity. I usually only buy things I like. So to whittle it down to my absolute favorites is tough. And I think it would actually almost be easier to do a top 10. Doing top 19 gives me a lot more slots to fill, and it has me, going outside of the very best and has me really picking and choosing between all these lines. And there was a lot of great figures this year. There's probably three main toy lines that I'm primarily collecting right now, which is Marvel Legends, the Star Wars 6-inch Black Series, and the Transformers Siege figures. Now, previously, I was really into Masters of the Universe and G.I. Joe. Those lines they've been pretty quiet this past year. So those are the kind of things you can expect to see on the list, but I think I've actually got a good variety of things here. The only criteria I really have for my list is that these are figures that had to have been released in 2019. So even if I get a really cool figure from 1980 that I've always really wanted, I can't put it on the list no matter how cool it is because it's not a 2019 figure. And this also only applies to figures that I actually acquired myself and added to my collection. There's tons of amazing toys being produced by lots of companies in Japan and stuff, like Hot Toys. These figures are hundreds of dollars. I'm sure if I bought every Hot Toy that came out or ranked every toy that was made this year, it would be a lot of that high-end stuff. But I'm kind of I collect mostly just retail figures, so that's the kind of stuff you're going to see on this list. So, yeah, I guess without any further ado, I'll jump right into it, and please feel free to comment below. So let's go at number 19. So right away, I'm going to start my list with a bit of a cheat. My number 19 favorite action figure of 2019 is this guy here. So this is the Tyrannosaurus Rex from the toy line for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Now that movie, as you're aware, came out in 2018, and the toy line for that movie came out in 2018 as well. And on last year's list, I actually had the Mosasaur, which is the big fish dinosaur in that movie. And this figure, I'm pretty sure, came out in 2018 as well, when that movie was first released. Now this toy, I don't know if you can tell, but it is huge. I can't even get it all in one shot here. So, this guy is big. And I didn't get this figure, partly because it was very expensive. I can't remember if it was $69 or $79, But either way, as cool as I thought this was, like, I'm a kid that grew up loving dinosaurs. What kid didn't? But yeah, I was a big dinosaur kid, and I love all things dinosaurs. I have the T-Rex figure from the first Jurassic Park movie, and he is dwarfed by this thing. But when this came out, I was like, I can't drop $70 on this figure. I've already got a pretty nice T-Rex, so I'm going to leave it behind. Now, this thing, the reason I feel I can include it on my list this year is it was re-released. I don't know if anything about the actual figure has changed, but the packaging had changed. They went from just the standard Fallen Kingdom packaging to something called Dino Rivals. And so I don't know, maybe they even added these slashes because the premise of the Dino Rivals was that the dinosaurs were, fighting each other, obviously. So this thing was re-released. I still passed on it initially, but then it went on sale down to $39. My brother ended up buying one and told me that I should check it out. And I thought, yeah, I definitely got to go see if there's any of those left. When I went to Walmart to grab one for $39, they had actually been marked down additionally, so I got this guy for $29, and I simply could not pass on that. When I think of how much I paid for some action figures that are like this big, to get this figure, which is a huge T-Rex with lots of posability, you see there he's got a hinged jaw, and he's hollow there. The intent is that he can swallow other figures, and then he's got a compartment on his belly here, which opens up so you can retrieve your figures. And yeah, he's posable in the legs, the arms, the tail. It's a great sculpt, nice paint job. This is a great figure. I think it's totally worth the $70. It just wasn't quite worth that to me. But yeah, to get it for $29, this thing was a steal. And yeah, I just kind of love it. So even though it was initially released in 2018, it was re-released in 2019. I just got it a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, I think it's awesome. And so there you go. T-Rex is my number 19 toy. So at number 18, I've got my one and only G.I. Joe that's going on this list. If you've watched my previous videos, you know I'm a huge G.I. Joe fan. You can see some of my G.I. Joe collection in the background over there. G.I. Joe is probably my favorite toy line of all time. And unfortunately, there were really no G.I. Joes that came out in 2019. Hasbro has kind of walked away from the property, at least for a little while, until another live-action movie comes out. So pretty much all of 2018 as well, the only figures we got were from the G.I. Joe Collectors Club, which was able to make licensed figures, kind of working with Hasbro, but it was really just made by the fan club, and they weren't, official retail releases. So this figure is part of what the Collectors Club called the Final 12. And just to quickly explain what that meant, is what the Collectors Club had done for the last several years was they had a figure subscription service. So you could pay like a one-time fee to be a member of the fan club, which got you newsletters and things like that. But you could also pay an additional amount of money to get the figure subscription service where they would send you, you'd get 13 figures in the mail over the course of 6 months. And it was really cool. And I did that for I think it was all 8 figure subscription services. And the last one was for 2018 because the Collectors Club had lost their license going into 2019. And they had managed at the very last minute to get the rights to do a final figure subscription service, but it was so rushed they couldn't do it in the same way they had done before, where they sent them out 2 figures at a time over the course of 6 months. So they called this subscription the Final 12, and they were just going to send you everything all at once. And the idea was these figures had to be done before the license expired in 2019. So they managed to get those figures out. However, they didn't get them all mailed out until very late in the year, and I didn't get these figures until 2019. So I would say they weren't released until 2019. So that's how I'm able to get at least one G.I. Joe on this list. And there were some nice figures in the Final 12, but pretty much all of them were repaints and re-releases of figures we already had. And this here is Hit and Run. Now, Hit and Run is a pretty cool looking G.I. Joe. We've actually had the same figure released a bunch of times in different paint jobs. This is the standard Hit and Run in his kind of classic, just green camo outfit. And what I like about this one and why I chose him out of the Final 12 to kind of represent the G.I. Joe brand on this list is because I liked all those figures, but this one really stood out to me, partly because Hit and Run is a really cool character, this is a really well-made figure with lots of nice detailing, nice proportions. All of his gear works really well and fits really well. See here, he's got the removable helmet. I love the stubble painted on his face, so he's got that kind of 5 o'clock shadow. But he's part of the sub-team Tiger Force, which I really like, which is where they just took existing Joes and painted them in tiger camo patterns. And they had that in North America in the 80s. But the funny thing is they made more Tiger Force figures over in the UK that never got released in North America. And I didn't learn about those figures until many, many years later. And Hit and Run was one of those limited edition UK releases that we never saw here. Now what the Collectors Club has done is reproduced that classic UK Tiger Force figure using the modern style G.I. Joe. And I think it looks really nice. Like, if I could only keep one Hit and Run figure in my collection, I would choose the classic one. But there's just something I find really appealing about these European Tiger Force figures. I don't know why the orange with that kind of baby blue might not make a whole lot of sense as far as the camouflage pattern is concerned. But the Tiger Force sneak peek that the club produced, which was another one of these UK releases, made my list a year or two ago as well. I just think they're really neat. And so that's why Hit and Run here has the number 18 slot. At number 17, I've got Marvel Legends Mysterio, based on his look from the live-action Spider-Man movie, Far From Home. Now, this figure here, I think, looks awesome. And it's based on just a really incredible redesign of the character for the movies. Because this is one of those characters that they've always kind of said just wouldn't translate very well to live action, because he's got kind of a goofy look with this big fishbowl for a head and his kind of green tights. But I think they gave him a really cool looking costume, and Jake Gyllenhaal looked great on screen wearing this. And it's very detailed. Mysterio's never had a very detailed costume. It's usually just been one big green onesie. But this here, he's got kind of almost like a gladiator armor, and it looks great. For the head, there's been multiple Mysterio figures, and they've never quite nailed the look of the head. But this here with this kind of, like, it's not clear. It's just kind of this foggy, and you see these little sparkles in it. It almost looks like you're looking into outer space or something. I think it looks really cool and mysterious. And his cape, he's always just had a purple plain cape. This one here's got some weird metallic green paint with some strange symbols on it. I don't know what any of it means, but it just adds a little extra flair. And Mysterio has always been a character that I've really loved. I think he's great in the movie. This figure represents that look really well. And it makes every previous Mysterio figure look pretty lame by comparison. Even this Mysterio we get from Hasbro just like a year prior. This is based on his comic book look. And I liked this figure, but you can see the body is kind of, he looks kind of scrawny at times. The cape, the plain purple cape, doesn't really sit well in the way it's attached to his globe. It kind of rattles around. And for a head, what they did there is there's a translucent skull with a tentacle running through it, which I don't know where they got that from. It's just something weird. And so yeah, you can kind of see that through the globe a little bit, which is kind of a neat idea, but I don't think they'd really nailed the best way to present that helmet. And here I think they really have. I think this Mysterio is way better than anything we've ever seen before. It's got all the posability and everything you'd expect from a typical Marvel Legends. So lots of joints there. And yeah, the paintwork is nice. I love all these colors. You can see how, all of it looks very metallic and very believable. And this figure is awesome, and that's why I picked him for number 17. At number 16, I've got the 6-inch Mandalorian from Hasbro's Star Wars Black Series. Now this guy here, I only got him maybe just a couple of months ago, just before the release of the Mandalorian TV series on Disney+. And I actually have not got to watch this whole series yet. I did not subscribe to Disney+. But I did manage to watch the first 4 episodes over Christmas. And yeah, I really liked it. I've never got into my feelings on the new Star Wars movie on this channel yet. I have some mixed feelings about that. But Mandalorian was just a very refreshing take on Star Wars in that, unlike the last couple of movies, it wasn't divisive in any way. It was just good, old-fashioned, fun Star Wars. It reminded me of the original trilogy, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And the fact that I liked that show so much really factored in me selecting this figure for the list, but it's a great figure regardless. But yeah, I thought when this figure first came out, and even when I first bought it, I thought that it was mostly going to be reused parts from the previously existing Boba Fett figure, but I actually don't think any of the parts are reused from Boba Fett. The armor is similar but different. Even the head, it's a unique head sculpt here, and I really like this color pattern. Now, from watching the show, he actually didn't wear this outfit for very long. He kind of upgraded to a much nicer, chromier outfit pretty early on. But I do kind of like this really kind of dusty Western look, which looks like something Clint Eastwood would wear if he was a Star Wars character. So as far as sculpting and articulation goes, this one's got everything you would want and expect in a Star Wars Black Series figure. It's very well done in that regard. And yeah, just the fact that this character is so cool really kind of puts it over the top. And for accessories, you get this little pistol, which can be holstered right here, which is pretty cool. And this gun here, which he uses to kind of shock people during the show. It looks like it has a couple of different functions. That's a really cool little Easter egg, because that's the weapon that Boba Fett first appeared to have when he showed up in the Star Wars Holiday Special way back when, before he'd even appeared on screen in one of the live action movies. So that's a really cool callback that they gave the Mandalorian, this kind of weird spear gun. So yeah, what else can you really say about this guy? Everybody loved Boba Fett, and now I think everybody's going to love this guy even more. The Mandalorian, number 16. Now at number 15, I've got this Soundwave from Super 7's reaction figure line. Now, if you're not familiar with reaction figures, they're made with 5 points of articulation, kind of like the vintage Star Wars figures of the 80s. So his head swivels just a little bit, but then his arms go forward and back, and his legs go forward, and that's essentially it. He does have a little weapon here, so this gun comes out of his hand, slides back in there, and you might think this looks like kind of a cheap little toy, and that's kind of the point. It's kind of supposed to be a callback to those simple toys of the 80s, and I kind of love it. I love the way it looks. If you've watched my previous reviews of Transformer figures, I never talk about their vehicle modes. I only really care about the robot modes. I don't care about cars. I don't really care about tape decks and stuff either. I always would have been kind of content as a kid to have a set of Transformers that didn't transform, as long as they looked like they looked in the cartoon. Now these ones here, I don't know if I would have wanted Transformers to be quite this simple. I would like a little bit more movement. But I like how when they don't need to transform, they're much more kind of boxy and streamlined, and they look like they do in the animated show. And I think that's great. Now, I was kind of torn about putting this figure on here because we got this other great Soundwave figure this year as part of the Siege line. And you see here, this is more typically what you'd expect from a Transformer. He's got a lot more range of movement here, very posable, obviously a ton more detail, very nice head sculpt. Everything about this figure is great, and this guy was very close to being on my list. Because pretty much the Siege line, I've got a lot of Siege figures in this past year, and almost any of them could have been on this list. They're very well made Transformers, and the line is represented as we go forward on the list. But I've got a few of these reaction Transformers too, and I just felt these guys needed some representation on the list as well, because even though this guy's great in a different way, and I just really get a kick out of him. He's really fun. This is the kind of figure you just want to throw in your pocket and take in the car and take to the beach or whatever, bring to work. They're just, they're really cool. I like it a lot. There's not much to be said about it other than it looks fantastic, and I think you should check them out. And I should mention, one of the most appealing things about these reaction figures is the vintage blister card packaging. So even if you wanted to just buy these things and pin them on your wall and keep them sealed, which I thought about doing, these packages look fantastic. Like, look at that original artwork on there. It feels like a vintage toy from the 80s. And yeah, again, highly recommended. So Transformers from Super 7. At number 14, I've got another transforming robot, but this is not a transformer. This is based on a GoBot, which was Tonka's rival to Transformers in the 80s. And there was a transforming train named Loco, which I didn't have as a kid, but my brother did. And I really loved those GoBots. They were smaller and simpler, and they had metal parts, and they were just really cool. And they were based on a line from Japan called Machine Robo. Now, this figure here is made by a company called Action Toys, and it's based on the Machine Robo version of Loco. And they call this figure Steam Robo. And yeah, he's, I don't know, he's not an official release of a Machine Robo. This is made by one of those third-party companies I've talked about in the past, which somehow make these licensed characters without any proper licensing. But and I believe that's the case with these things. I don't think they're officially Machine Robo. But yeah, maybe they are. Either way, I think it's really cool. It's a bit bigger and a lot more detailed, a lot more articulated than the original GoBot ever was. And yeah, even though Loco wasn't my favorite GoBot, he was one that I always thought was really cool. And I really hope we get more of these in the future, because there were GoBots that I really did like Coptor, who I'd really like to see in this format. Because yeah, this guy's a nice size. He's not too big, not too small. He fits in with my Transformer collection. Like I said, he's got a lot of movement there. Head turns, arms turn, elbows, wrists, toes, and he transforms into a pretty nice looking train. I've actually never transformed him myself because, as I just told you, I don't really care all that much about their alt modes. But you can see here I still have the box that he came in. And this shows you the like steam engine that he transforms into, which looks pretty nice. So yeah, sometimes these third-party figures are very expensive, but these ones here from Action Toys weren't too bad. So if you were a GoBots fan or a Machine Robo fan, I recommend you check them out. So there you go. There's Steam Robo at number 14. At number 13, I've got Wolverine. So this is from Marvel Legends by Hasbro as part of their 80th anniversary line of figures. This guy came in a 2-pack with Hulk, and it was based on the first appearance of Wolverine when he showed up in Hulk comic books before he was ever in the X-Men books. And this one kind of surprised me. When I was a kid, Wolverine was already an established X-Men character, and he had the big, classic fins on his mask. And when I first learned about Wolverine's initial appearance in Hulk, I thought he looked pretty stupid. I didn't like this look with the kind of like whiskers on his mask and the little teeny spikes. And yeah, I've passed on versions of this costume in the past. And really, the only thing that compelled me to buy this 2-pack was the Hulk, because I didn't have a Hulk figure in the modern Marvel Legends style. But I did have a Wolverine or two already. So this one here didn't really feel like a priority to me in any way. But to my pleasant surprise, I really love this figure. And I don't know why. I guess I've just grown a new appreciation for this classic first appearance look. Because the rest of the figure, a lot of it I think we've seen before on the previous Wolverines. Now mind you, all the previous Wolverines have been very nice figures in their own right. And I've seen them grace many best of lists in the past. So this one, I think he shares a lot of the same body with those prior Wolverine releases. It's a little shorter than other Marvel Legends, which is the way it's supposed to be. Wolverine's supposed to be kind of a short guy. So I'm sure there may be a couple other new parts on here, but the only one really worth talking about is the new head sculpt. And I just think it's great. I love the look of this mask. And I love this costume. I love kind of how short and scrappy he looks. I love how bright the colors are, because I don't have the yellow costume Wolverine, even with the big spiky mask. The only ones I have are in the kind of more muted, like orange or I think some people call it the Tiger Strike costume or something. And then I also have his black and gray X-Force costume. So yeah, this is my first yellow Wolverine, yellow and blue, and I think he looks awesome and he's a lot of fun. And I kept kind of going back and fiddling around with him long after I bought this thing. Hulk is tucked away on my shelf, but Wolverine I just get a big kick out of. And so yeah, when I was putting this list together, I couldn't help but put him on there. So there you go, Wolverine at number 13. At number 12, I have another Marvel Legends from Hasbro, and this is the Red Goblin. Now, this is another figure that kind of surprised me to put on this list, because this is a character I'm surprised that I even like. What this is the Green Goblin merged with Carnage, so a mashup of two Spider-Man villains. Now, the Green Goblin is my all-time favorite Spider-Man villain, and I've been really disappointed with the Marvel Legend we got of the Green Goblin. So maybe that's partly why I'm drawn to this one, because the Green Goblin, who is Norman Osborn, who used to be Spider-Man's like arch enemy, he still is, but in more recent years he's gone on to become like a main villain in the entire Marvel universe. Like he fights the Avengers and all that sort of stuff. So he's a guy that I really feel needs representation on my shelf in Marvel Legends, and the Green Goblin figure they gave us just didn't cut it. And so this figure here at least appears kind of menacing. You could argue it also looks kind of goofy, and I would see that argument too. Carnage has never been one of my favorite characters, but I don't know why I like this version of the Green Goblin merged with Carnage. So you see here he's got very much Carnage look, the red and the black. He's got these tendrils of symbiote coming off of him. He's got this weird tail. I don't know why. Carnage never had a tail, neither did the Green Goblin. I don't think goblins traditionally have tails, so that's just kind of a weird thing to add, but it's directly out of the comic books. The head here, it's kind of looks like they took the design from the Green Goblin helmet from the Tobey Maguire movies, where he had that big kind of cone-shaped helmet, which nobody liked and everybody complained about, and yet for some reason they seem to have adopted that for the Red Goblin here, and none of it should work, and yet I just find myself liking it. I don't know, it's just very comic booky, it's very weird, and yeah, like any Marvel Legend, he's got all kinds of great articulation, double jointed elbows and knees. For accessories, I think he came with, I've got one of his little pumpkin bombs here. I can't remember what else he might have come with. That might be it, but that's really all he really needs. He's just a weird looking character, and I think part of the reason I think he's kind of fun and why he's on my list is that a lot of the figures I'm getting here, whether it be G.I. Joes or Transformers or Marvel Universe, it's all a lot of characters that maybe I already have dozens of figures of already, and maybe they're just improved versions of those characters. But this guy here, this is a brand new character. Mind you, it's a lazy one because it just took two existing characters and smushed them together. But this is the first ever Red Goblin figure, and that makes it kind of exciting. And he only first appeared in comic books just about a year ago, so they really got him out onto toy store shelves very quickly after he was created. So this isn't somebody like, there's characters like, say, Sleepwalker that I was introduced to in the 90s and have been wanting a figure of for decades. If you liked this character the first time you saw him in the comic books, it was just a couple of months later that you had him in your hands. So yeah, there you go. That's why I've put Red Goblin as number 12 on my list. At number 11, I've got Valor Omega. Now this is one of the Jaegers from Pacific Rim Uprising, and this was a figure that came out very early in the year because the movie had come out like the year, maybe even 2 years prior. I can't recall right now. But yeah, I loved Pacific Rim Uprising. I know a lot of people didn't. I liked the first Pacific Rim quite a bit too. And I know Pacific Rim 2 was kind of a lot maybe dumber and simpler. But I kind of liked that about it. It didn't take itself all that seriously. And one thing that I thought Pacific Rim Uprising had over Pacific Rim 1 was the Jaeger designs. I loved the kaijus from the first movie, and I bought all the kaiju figures from the original Pacific Rim, but I didn't buy a single one of the Jaegers. But then when it came to the sequel, not only did I buy the kaiju, but I wanted to buy all the Jaegers too, because like even the main character, that went from being Gypsy Danger to Gypsy Avenger. I thought that was a vast improvement in design. I loved the evil Jaeger, Obsidian Fury. And I didn't necessarily set out to buy all of the Jaegers. And this guy here, if you're wondering about where he appeared on screen, I'm not even sure what to tell you. I think they maybe walked past him in a hangar somewhere. He doesn't do anything in the movie. This is not one of the main Jaegers that are piloted by any of the named characters. I probably would not have even bought this figure. But what I wanted was the combination Jaeger kaiju. So that's the one in the white armor, the drone where the kaijus took over and they all started busting out of the armor. And so I wanted that really more for my kaiju collection than anything else. But the only place I could find it for sale was at Big Bad Toy Store online, and they were only selling it as part of a full wave. So I had to get like 4 figures in order to get that one figure. And so I thought, well, these figures are pretty cool, so I don't mind getting the other ones. But if they were selling them individually, I probably would have skipped on Valor Omega completely. And I'm really glad that that's not the way it went down, because I would have been missing out on this really awesome figure. I just love the design of this thing. Like, for one, I love big giant robots, so I was really disappointed that I didn't care for the designs in the first Pacific Rim. So I was really happy that they made designs that were more appealing to me in the second movie. And yeah, this one here I think is the best of the new designs. I really wish they had used this on screen a little bit more. Now, as far as the figure goes, it's a little stiff. His posability is, I don't know, I don't think he has a ton of range of motion. His head here, I can't even get it to turn. I don't know if it's intended to, but it feels like it's supposed to turn, but I don't want to risk breaking it. Swivels at the waist there. His legs have very limited movement. But for something to make my top 10 list, it doesn't need to be super articulated or anything, because let's be honest, I don't really play with these toys. I just like to display them, and I think this guy looks cool as hell on my shelf. I wish I had more robots that look like this. And yeah, I think that's really all I have to say about Valor Omega, is he looks awesome. So we crack into the top 10 with Kalos from the Mythic Legions line. Now, if you're not familiar with Mythic Legions, it is an original toy line that was launched just a couple of years ago by famed toy designers of the Four Horsemen, who had previously worked for McFarlane Toys and done work for Mattel. They've pretty much done all the designing for the Masters of the Universe figures ever since the relaunch in 2002, right up to present day. And yeah, so they obviously still like to homage Masters of the Universe, as they are huge fans of that property. So they have found ways to reference Masters of the Universe in their own original toy line. So they've done a couple figures in the past where they had some skeleton figures, and they did one where he was painted blue and had a hood, so he was kind of an homage to Skeletor from Masters of the Universe. They had a warrior that they painted blonde, and he just kind of looked like He-Man. So this one here, they've taken their pre-existing like cat character. They originally released this guy with a different set of armor, and he was kind of painted up like a jaguar with like yellow fur and spots. And so they repainted him here as a green tiger with orange stripes. And so that is very clearly an homage to Battle Cat, which is the giant tiger that He-Man rode around on. And even his name, Kalos, which might imply that he's a coward of some sort, is a nod to Battle Cat's alter ego, Cringer. So you'll see here, this is a figure of Cringer that the Four Horsemen would have designed for Mattel several years ago. And so this is what Cringer looked like when he was walking around. And he was a coward. Every time danger would come up, he'd go hide in the corner, and that was kind of his thing. But then Prince Adam would hold up his power sword, and he'd transform into He-Man, and he'd point his sword at Cringer, and Cringer would turn into the armored Battle Cat, which you see here. So there he is with his maroon armor and his battle helmet. But underneath there, he's just a ferocious green tiger with orange stripes. So this here is what the Horsemen homaged with this figure here. But even besides the Masters of the Universe reference, this is just a beautiful figure. Now, it reuses a lot of parts from previous Mythic Legions releases. Like, I've got these same spiked boots on other figures. I'm sure the legs, the arms, everything's been reused here. but it all works great, and they create such original characters with each of these. Like the armor is all removable here. So you see on the back, these things here you can unplug. You have the option to add like wings if you wanted to do that. You can change out all of his weapons. They come with lots of alternate weapons. Like I really like these 2 shields that he came with. It makes for a really cool look there, but you can shake those up however you want. And even his he's got this separate neck piece to kind of give him some added bulk, which the previous cat figure did not have. So you can do this, and now he's a much more kind of regular sized guy. He doesn't look quite so big and menacing as he does. So they're very customizable, and it's a great figure, and I would have loved this thing regardless, but the little nod to Battle Cat is just too good to pass up. So that's why this guy is in my top 10 action figures of 2019. At number 9, I've got General Grievous from the Star Wars Black Series. Now, Grievous was always a great looking character, but he's not from the greatest of Star Wars movies, so I don't have the same attachment to him that I would, say, a character from the original trilogy. There's not too many characters from the prequels that I have a fondness for, other than Darth Maul, really. But yeah, this guy is pretty cool, and this is a great figure. So he's got this soft goods cloak, which feels very nice and looks good. Oftentimes when they use soft goods with these toys, they look kind of awkward and they don't hang right. But I think this works really well with him. And you can remove it there. And one of the cool features about it is it has these pouches right there in the cape where you can store the 4 lightsabers that he's collected from the Jedis that he's killed. So you can take the blades out of them and then just tuck the lightsaber handles in there, which is pretty cool, just like in the movie. And yeah, so he's got 4 arms there, all of which are posable at the elbows and the wrists. They're all ball jointed. He came with these 4 lightsabers as accessories, all of which have the removable blades. His legs are really cool articulated there. He's got the double jointed knees, those kind of cool claw-like feet. It's just a really cool designed character. And I have a figure of this guy in the 3 3/4 inch scale, and it just didn't really do him justice. I think you really need a figure of this size to really appreciate the design of this guy. And yeah, this figure is just really cool. Even the small details, like if we get up close on his face here, and you can see his kind of cat-like eyes and what looks like a kind of burned skin underneath. It's just a lot of nice details. Look at all those different wires that make up his neck. Just everything going on here is really cool. And it's it's a very unique piece. I don't imagine they've reused any of these parts to make any other characters. I don't really see how you could. Everything about General Grievous is is pretty unique to just him. And yeah, this is just a really cool figure. My only real gripe about it is that it's he's kind of so awkwardly shaped, and he's got such narrow legs that I have a hard time getting him to stand up on his own. So when I display this guy, I just have him sitting on the back of a dewback, and that seems to work out okay. So there you go. So that's General Grievous in number 9. So for my number 8 spot, I was gonna kind of cheat and pick Reflector here. Now this figure, called Reflector, as it says on his shoulder pads there, was sold in one package. And basically what it is, it's the exact same figure 3 different times, but with different paint jobs and different accessories. And you can transform all 3 of them together and they form a camera. You can transform each one of them individually into kind of a weird little spaceship, but the intention was that they would form a camera because these toys are a remake of an 80s figure, which was the same thing. They shared these colors, the 3 of them merged to make a camera, and the individual spaceships wasn't even an option back then. So this was going to be my number 8 pick, which is kind of a cheat because it's 3 in 1. But if I'm being honest, and I have to pick one thing for my number 8 slot, I'm actually going to pick this version of Reflector. This one here is the regular retail release. So you can buy this one just on its own. And before we knew that they were going to release this 3-pack, a lot of people were just buying this one figure 3 times because it works the exact same way. You can transfer this guy into just one little spaceship, But if you bought it 3 times, you could have one big purple camera as opposed to this kind of multicolored camera. So while it's neat that these figures here match the vintage 3 figures that formed the camera in the 80s, what I like about this toy here is it matches how Refractor, or Reflector as he used to be known, this is how he was colored in the cartoons. And this is the only way I knew him, because I didn't have the vintage toy, and I don't really know anybody that did, because it was a mail away only, so it wasn't the kind of thing that all of your friends had. So this is the only way I knew Reflector, was this purple and green version. And as cool as it is that those 3 guys make up the camera, it's really this guy that I have the attachment to. And yeah, I really like the way he looks. I think this purple and green one looks better individually than any of the other 3 on their own, even despite the accessories of this guy having the shoulder pads, or this guy having the fancy extra shield, and this guy has the flash bulb on his arm. Those are all kind of neat, but I think this guy here on his own, just with the 1 gun and the 1 shield, is really all you need. And if you're, unable to find the 3-pack there, I would actually recommend you buy this guy 3 times over. That way you could have all 3 characters from the show. And this is just one of those characters that I've always liked, and he's never had an official release from Hasbro until now, other than that mail away, which was kind of hard to come by when you were a kid. And yeah, this guy really delivered the goods, even though he's pretty simple. This is just a regular release Transformer, costs about $20 or whatever, but this guy's awesome. So Refractor/Reflector at number 8. At number 7, I've got Kurz. So this is another one of the 4 Horsemen's Mythic Legions figures. And I don't know if you can tell this on his own, but this guy is larger than Kalos was. Most of the Mythic Legions are 6-inch figures, so the same scale as Marvel Legends and Star Wars Black. But they also have some smaller figures that are about 3 3/4 inch, which they use for like dwarves and smaller scale creatures like that, goblins. And they've also got some 12-inch figures, which make for big trolls. So this figure here, this is from the first wave of 9-inch figures. So this is a new scale they've added to the line. And this is for ogres and giants. So there was 3 figures released at this size this year. I've got all 3 of them. And it was really hard to pick one over the other. So Kurz here is an ogre. And he looks great. Mythic Legions always have a ton of sculpted detail and intricate paint jobs. Like you see here, every little rivet on his armor here is painted. There's some good wear there, like this looks like real leather. And then there's even fur bits here on his loincloth. Everything down here to his shin armor, everything just looks great. And yeah, this figure is just something to behold. At this size and this weight and the amount of accessories he had a couple other ones beyond just this spear here. It just makes for a really cool, really imposing looking character. And I just don't know what else to say about it other than it is awesome. And at number 6, I've got Bolthor the Tower. So this is the one giant that was released in the 9-inch scale. The other 2 were both ogres. So this guy here, like I said, it was so hard to pick one over the other, which is why they came in one right beside the other. And even the third one in this scale, even though it's not on my list, it very easily could have been, and he was just the ogre soldier. But these 2 here are both unique characters, and they have a little more elaborate paint jobs, which is why they edged out the other 9-inch figure. And the reason this guy edges out Kurz is really because of this head sculpt. I love this helmet with these kind of crazy unsymmetrical horns. It's just such a cool design. Otherwise, they share pretty much all the same parts. Like you'll notice everything from the chest armor matches up the same. They have the same type of loincloth and everything here, even though they do have different crests on their belt buckles. And also where this guy's got bare feet, he's got big armored feet. And these are similar to what we saw on Kalos. So yeah, just great figures all around. These Mythic Legions figures always impress me. As long as they keep making them, they're going to keep showing up on my best of lists. But yeah, something about these new 9-inch scale figures just really impressed me. And yeah, I'm glad to know that we're getting more of these in 2020. So if you missed out on these ones, stay tuned for some future releases. And we break into our top 5 with Shredder from NECA's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle animated line. So these animated figures were released in 2 packs. So there was the 4 turtles, and they each came with Shredder, Krang, and 2 foot soldiers. And I'm not a huge Ninja Turtle fan. Like, it's not necessarily true. Like, I've always liked Ninja Turtles, and I still buy the comic books, and I watch the movies and all that stuff. But it did come along a little later in my childhood, so I don't have the same attachment to Ninja Turtles as I do with G.I. Joe and Transformers, Star Wars, things like that. And I really did not anticipate buying a bunch of new Ninja Turtle figures this year. But these animated style figures from NECA are just awesome. I bought all 4 packs. I originally set out just to buy this pack with Shredder and Leonardo. It was convenient because Leonardo is my favorite turtle, and this Shredder figure is what I really thought I needed, where I didn't really care to get foot soldiers and Krang, but I was so impressed with this figure that I decided to buy the rest of them as well. And I'm going to continue to buy the line, as we're expecting a few more 2-packs this year. And yeah, this figure is just awesome. Like, Shredder has always been a cool looking villain, but I don't think he's ever had a toy that has ever done him justice. Like the one from the original line, he was kind of hunched over to kind of make him the same size as the turtles. And, you know, he was shirtless, and he had, like, I think his helmet was blue, and it just didn't quite match up with how he looked in either the comic books or the cartoons. And then later releases, again, he always seemed too small. They scaled him down to match the turtles, but the turtles were always kind of thick and round, whereas Shredder ended up looking really small by comparison. And yeah, I just don't think he's ever had a good figure until now, because this figure is just wicked. Like, look at this head sculpt here. And they even have that kind of cell shading, so it looks like he's stepping right out of an animation cell. You can see how it's like this subtle blue on gray paint job. You can see that throughout the figure. Here as well, it's gray on gray. The articulation's really nice. You got double jointed knees and elbows, swivels at the wrist and ankles and waist and the head. You know, everything's great here, and he came with a bunch of accessories. I think he had a couple of swords. He had like a little communicator, a bunch of alternate hands. It's just a really cool figure of a character that has long deserved a figure of this caliber. And yeah, it's made me kind of excited about collecting Ninja Turtle figures again for the first time in a long while. So there you go. That's Shredder at number 5. At number 4, I've got Optimus Prime from Hasbro's Transformers Siege line. So Siege is the new line that Hasbro started at the very late stages of 2018 and is pretty much carried on pretty strong all through 2019. And they're rebooting for 2020. It's kind of a continuation of this line, except the figures that they release next year are all going to be in their Earth modes, whereas all the characters from Siege are in their Cybertronian modes. So even though this Optimus Prime looks pretty classic, a lot like his G1 or Generation 1 look, he actually does transform more into kind of a Cybertronian style truck instead of like an Earth truck. But yeah, what's cool about this figure is just how kind of classic G1 he looks. And I'm really surprised that I have another Optimus Prime on my list, because Optimus Prime is one of those characters, and he's super cool, and he's the most iconic of all Transformers, but he's been done to death. He must have, 60 different figures or so of him by now. And I actually had an Optimus Prime on my list last year, because it was a really nice, classic-looking Optimus Prime, except what made that one so unique is that you could kind of break it down, and you could transform it into Orion Pax, which was Optimus Prime's kind of civilian identity before he became Optimus Prime. And this one here, I think it's just even better. Like, Optimus Prime is a character that I always want the best version of, and I was pretty pleased with the one from last year, but this one is just that much better in design. I kind of like this scuffed up paint job he has, but I think the proportions look better. He works better with the other figures in the line. The other one was maybe a little bit too tall. This guy here is pretty good about the extra kibble and stuff he has on him. Like, I don't like these extra pieces that hang off his arm, but it's not too bad. And even this piece here on the back, which feels kind of extra, it almost kind of just looks like a jetpack, which Optimus Prime has been known to use. So that's not too bad. And yeah, even his legs here, he kind of makes up the whole trailer component. It's all in one. He doesn't have a big separate trailer piece. It's just an awesome Optimus Prime. And I'm surprised to have Optimus Prime on my list 2 years in a row. And to be honest, I almost had Optimus Prime on my list twice this year because I was very close to including the Reaction Optimus Prime on this list as well, because I just think this is kind of perfect. But I opted for Soundwave instead. But yeah, Optimus Prime is just one of those characters that I kind of never seem to get bored of, and they just keep finding new ways to make him interesting. So yeah, this is just a really cool Optimus Prime, and that's why he is number 4 on my list. So at number 3 on my list, I have Leonardo by NECA. Now, I told you how this Leonardo here is the animated one, and it came in a 2-pack with Shredder. And I mostly bought the pack for Shredder, but I thought the Leonardo was really cool too. And when I got this figure, I thought, wow, this is so much better than any Leonardo figure I've ever had before. And I've probably got 4 or 5 Leonardos. And yeah, this one is just the best. And I thought this guy is probably going to make my year-end list. But I did not expect to get a better Leonardo just about 2 weeks later. So this guy is off the list, and he has been replaced by this Leonardo, also by NECA. And this is based on his live-action movie look from the 90s. And this thing here is just superb. NECA is knocking it out of the park with both their animated and movie-based lines. They've actually got a pretty nice movie-based Shredder coming out, but I still would have preferred the animated look to the live-action look. But when it comes to the Turtles, I don't know if I have a preference. They were so well done by Jim Henson in those live-action movies that I love this look as much as I love their animated looks. And I probably do prefer the live-action look as it's a little more gritty. So you see here with the paint job, he's got multiple greens and little speckles in there. There's lots of detail. Like, it looks like real skin. The eyes are very lifelike. Everything about this is great. And it had a lot of accessories too. I've got them displayed here with the swords and the sheaths. That's all you really need for a Leonardo figure. It's got nice articulation. It poses really well. It's just awesome. I think this has got to be the pinnacle of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures. I know I might say stuff like that somewhat often about like this has got to be the best, figure of so-and-so ever. But this, I mean it. I really don't know what they could do to make this better. I don't think making it bigger or smaller or adding more weapons or brightening the colors or it's just perfect. I really don't need anything more from this. So that's why it's so high up on the list. If I was a bigger Ninja Turtle fan, this guy would probably be my number 1 figure of the year. But even as a kind of casual Turtle fan, this guy still ranks at number 3, which is very high up. I think it's awesome. In the number 2 spot, I've got Ultra Magnus from Hasbro's Transformers Siege. Now, I got this figure, it was either January or February of this year, very early on. And I remember when I got it, I said, this is probably going to be my figure of the year. It is just gnarly. Like, Ultra Magnus is a character that I really like. Maybe not so much when he first rolled out, because he was one of those Transformers that was introduced in the animated movie that kind of replaced all the Generation 1 Autobots, so I was a little leery on him. But he's really kind of grown on me over the years. I really like his characterization of being kind of this stickler for the rules and stuff. And what IDW has done with him in their comic books has really made him an interesting character. I've really come to love this guy. And the figure I had of him in my collection previously was basically garbage. So I've really been wanting a really good figure of this guy. And this one absolutely delivers. It also kind of helps that, so the Siege figures come in different scales and different price points. The average ones, kind of the size of Reflector, those guys are $29. Then you've got the size of Optimus Prime, and those guys are $39. And then you've got these guys, which are $59. So when you're paying $60 for a figure, you want it to feel like $60. And I bought Ultra Magnus at the same time as I bought Shockwave, who was also a $60 figure. And Shockwave is a character I like much more than Ultra Magnus. Shockwave is one of my top 5 favorite Transformers. But that figure, he was a dinky little small Transformer. He should have been the same price as Reflector, except he came with a bunch of stupid add-on stuff to bulk him up, which just seems stupid. So that figure I felt ripped off by, and getting him right alongside this figure, this one made me feel like this was justified in paying this price, because look at how thick this guy is. He's heavy to lift. Look at the size, like the width of his legs. Like if he kicked you, you'd feel that one. The size of those feet. This is just a big, bulky, badass Transformer. And he looks like he's supposed to look. Like, I'm sure he's tweaked a little bit. He's got some of that battle damage paint. It's very minimal on him. Much less than it was on Optimus, but you can see, rather than being just a nice crisp blue, he's got some of this gray scuff there. You see it on his feet as well. So he's probably tweaked a little bit for the Siege line to look more Cybertronian, but it's very true to how the original figure looked, and very true to how this character looks in comic books and cartoons. And as is basically the tradition with all Ultra Magnuses, if you open this guy up, see if I can remember how to do this, but basically inside of this thing, I can't even do it, bear with me. Now, I haven't done this properly. I haven't had to take them apart in months, and I was really worried about breaking anything, so these blue parts come off of them as well. But just like the classic 80s Ultra Magnus, you can strip away all the armor, and there's basically just a white Optimus Prime inside. So I like that this one still maintains the tradition of doing that. And considering that this Optimus Prime is very close to the one that I just named as earlier on the list just a couple spots ago, how could this figure not be at the top of the list when contained inside of it, like a little Easter egg, is one of the other best toys of the year? Like, you don't get much better than that. So this figure on its own is really cool. And then you strap on all the Ultra Magnus parts, and it's just that much cooler. So that's why Ultra Magnus, he was so close to taking the top spot this year, but he just got edged out by something just a hint cooler. But Ultra Magnus, from the moment I first saw it and first played with it, this thing is awesome, and I highly recommend you seek one out. And my number one toy of 2019 is this Skeletor from Super 7's animated Masters of the Universe line. Now, kind of like the T-Rex that I named in the number 19 slot, you could say this is kind of a cheat, because Mattel put out basically this exact figure, which was, I think they were calling it their Filmation series, because they had done a Skeletor figure kind of based on the old toy line and everything, and they're part of their Masters of the Universe Classics line. And then as the Classics line was winding down, they started doing these toys that were very specific to the animation, which was produced by Filmation in the 80s. So their Filmation series was inspired by the old cartoon, and Mattel put out a figure that almost basically identical to this, and that was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. The problem was they put those out in very limited numbers. They were very hard to get, and they were doing that just as they were winding up their Masters of the Universe Classics line, and then they gave the rights to make Masters of the Universe toys over to another company, Super 7. and Super 7 started doing their own thing, continuing on in the tradition of Mattel. But one of the things they did is they expanded on the animated line, and because they knew some of these characters, some of the key characters, like Skeletor and He-Man, were missed out on by so many fans, they re-released them this year in what they called their Ultimates line. So they took what Mattel had basically given us before, but they expanded on it with new weapons and an alternate head. So this is the original head that Mattel gave us, but Super 7 also produced a laughing Skeletor head because he was cackling in pretty much every episode of the cartoon. So that was a really cool addition as well. I've chosen to display him just with his more standard head though. So yeah, some people might have had this figure in their collection for a few years now, but this version here by Super 7, which is slightly different, the colors might not be the exact same, the quality of plastic is probably a little different, and this one here did have additional accessories. But regardless, it's brand new to me, and I'm so pleased that Super 7 decided to re-release these figures, because there's a couple of the other animated ones that they did not re-release, and now I'll probably never get a chance to own Beastman or Trapjaw, because they were all released in such limited numbers. And, it's a shame not to get those characters, but it would have been a real shame to not have gotten He-Man and Skeletor. So thank you, Super 7, for going back and revisiting these things. And these things are just friggin' awesome. So these were sculpted by the Four Horsemen, the same guys that do the Mythic Legions line. And you can see why they're such, they have such a fan base, because people love what they do on these other lines. And this is just the perfect Skeletor figure. Like all the Skeletor figures I have from the Masters of the Universe Classics line, all of which were sculpted by the Four Horsemen, are all awesome. But this one here, looking just like it did from the cartoon, I don't think you can get any better than this. I love the color, I love the sculpt, I love the articulation, I love the size. Kind of like I said with Leonardo, I think this is probably the best Skeletor figure you could ever ask for. I don't really know what they could do that would make me say, yeah, this is better. It's just fantastic. And that is why it is my number one toy of 2019. Okay, so that was my top 19 action figures of 2019. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I'm really curious to hear what your favorite figures of the year were. So please post your lists below too. As always, thanks so much for watching. Belated Merry Christmas, or Happy Holidays, and whatever you celebrate. And Happy New Year to everybody. So I'll see you next time.